Good evening and welcome to a special edition of Nevada Weekly. I'm Terry Nault with John Marshall. John, welcome to our special edition.
Thanks, Terry.
Have a big show tonight.
We sure do.
We have two features on our program, both of which will have wide interest to all of the people in the state of Nevada. Later on in the show, we're going to take a look at some insights into the controversial MX missile. But first, we're going to take a look at UNR's exciting new teleconferencing system called Unite.
This system was initiated by UNR's EPSI, which is an acronym for Extended Programs and Continuing Education, and the program was coordinated by our Office of Communications and Broadcasting. UNR inaugurated, kicked off Unite, as it were, just a few weeks ago with a very lively debate among 32 members of the Nevada State Bar Association and the Nevada State Press Association. What do you suppose lawyers and journalists would want to talk about or debate about? Well, nothing other than the First Amendment, which guarantees freedom of the speech and the press. Our assistant producer, Judy Drews, files this report.
Okay, very fine. This is testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is the Unite teleconferencing. Unite teleconferencing.
Hello, this is Tony calling in from Winnemucca.
Bob Ritter in Reno. I'm Beatty in Las Vegas. Earl Kennedy in Hawthorne.
Terry Barkley
February 11th, 1980, 10 a.m. UNR's teleconferencing system, Unite, officially began operations with a very successful seminar on the First Amendment. We asked Coordinator Grayson Gibbs of the Office of Communications and Broadcasting just what Unite means.
Unite is an acronym that we chose with really a lot of care. Unite means University of Nevada, Reno, Interactive Teleconferencing for Education. I know that's a long term, but really what it's talking about is live interactive communication between the citizens of Northern Nevada and the rest of the world.
We recently had a seminar here on campus, a teleconferencing situation between the Nevada Bar Association and the press, and it was a very important occasion for us. Why was it important to UNR?
I think it was important because it gives the citizens of Nevada really an opportunity to see for the first time just one of the possibilities for live interaction between individuals that have a common subject. In this case, it was freedom of information issues, the First Amendment. That kind of thing I think is important to us all. But again, it was more the possibilities of the system.
Let's take a look at how some of that seminar went.
Hello, everyone across the state, students, listeners, those that want to learn about what we're to
15
speak
Nevada
about today.
communities were online for the
And to
teleconference,
some
plus
32
James Goodall, former general
media
counsel
and
for the
bar
New York Times, who
representatives,
joined the debate from New York.
of Nevada.
Columnist Roland Melton of the Reno Evening Gazette and Journal was moderator, and guests in the Reno studio included UNR President Joe Crowley, Bruce Roberts, President of the Nevada Bar Association, Warren LaRude, publisher of the Journal and Gazette, Dr. Larry Helms, director of the UNR Extended Programs, Roger Detweiler, executive director of the Nevada Bar Association, Robert Ritter, executive editor of the Reno Gazette and Journal, and Dick Dankworth, vice president of UNR Services. The big question was, would everyone participate? Would they volunteer their opinions and argue their points? Listen.
The First Amendment, the cornerstone of American freedoms.
This is Dorothy Kosich in Carson City again. A point we've been discussing here amongst ourselves is I think we're losing sight of the purpose of the First Amendment. And we're all talking about its applications to the press and the law, which is pertinent here. However, I think we tend to forget that the main purpose of the First Amendment was to protect the individual right and the individual freedoms. And perhaps I'd like to see some of the people out on the line address how we could better inform the individual of his right, rather than always harping on what the press doesn't get. Maybe we should take the angle of what the First Amendment can do for the individual.
This is Tom Perkins in Winnemucca. Maybe we ought to hit everyone on the head with it. I think all these rights are pretty risky. You know, that's one of the investments that we made when we adopted this Constitution. And the process of conflict between the press and the courts as it evolves is a healthy, robust, violent kind of thing that we institutionalize to avoid the type of mortal strife that you see in a lot of other countries in the world.
This is Jeff Rawbeck at State Line, Nevada. I've been sitting here with an 8th grade class, and they were quite well informed as to what the First Amendment meant. They're studying that in civics at this point. So I think going with Tom Succi's comments of a little while ago that the press and that Gallup poll is underestimating the knowledge that the American people have as to the constitutional rights. At this age, they know what the First Amendment means. 10 years from now, they know that they're going to have the freedom of religion and press and speech. But right now, they know what the First Amendment means. But they later on, they will also know what it means, but they may not know exactly which amendment it came out of.
Steve Hoffman and Fallon again. I'm not really sure that I'm convinced the general public really cares that much. They care, but do they really care until it directly affects them in reality, in practice, general practice? Do they really care that they have these basic freedoms until such time as if they have to go to court?
This is Warren LaRue in Reno. I don't think we should lose sight of the fact that when a journalist does go into litigation on these press matters, that we are in fact representing the individual American. When a reporter in upstate New York was barred from a preliminary hearing, the Gannett Company proceeded to litigate that to preserve the individual American's right to observe the judicial process. And,
what are some of the other uses for this system besides this kind of a conference?
I wish I had all the answers to that one, Judy. That's kind of an easy question. But really it is something that I think is going to evolve here in Nevada as the people of Nevada begin to understand really what is possible. The types of things that we envision might be done are, for example, superintendents' meetings. Might be an arts council meeting. People who have a need to get together and yet perhaps can't afford to travel, don't have the travel budgets, or just don't have the time to spend traveling around the state. Other possibilities, training for industry, training for state personnel, where they are all over the state and yet they want a standardized training program. It might be football coaches that want to organize a football schedule for the next fall rather than trying to do it via the mail. It takes a long time to organize it that way. Other things, we're talking to Senator Cannon and Senator Laxalt in Washington, and we're also talking to Senator Santini's people. And the idea there would be perhaps there'd be town hall meetings where they'd be in Washington, and yet it's important to them to find out what the citizens' opinion is on something that's before Congress. The same might be true of something that's before the legislature in Carson City. On something like that, instead of people traveling to Carson City to give testimony, they could use the Unite system to give their comments or reactions to something that's going on.
The primary purpose will be for nighttime classes to be broadcast out to northern Nevada, to the small communities. How will this work?
Well, I think the way it's going to work is that we're going to talk about professors being in the university studio here in Reno. And in each situation, the professor will have a press-to-talk microphone. He'll also have a speaker. And then if you can think about it as being a party line, a telephone party line. I grew up in northern Idaho, and I'm sure in northern Nevada here, perhaps some of the people in the rural areas are used to a party line where if you pick up the phone and someone else is talking, you hear that person. So with the Unite system, there are 15 locations, and each one of them has, exactly like we have here, a speaker and a microphone. Students out there, if you will be able to just plug into the party line, and anytime they have a question or comment back to the professor, they simply press the microphone bar and they're into the conversation. By the way, everybody else in the entire system would also hear that question or comment.
Nevada Weekly visited with Grace Donahauer, Associate Director of the Extended Programs for Continuing Education. She's worked in the field of continuing education at UNR for 21 years. We asked her about the background of Unite and how it came into its existence.
It's really been quite a long time in its beginning and fulfillment. I've been interested in the conferencing concept for many, many years, and then about 4 years ago they had a demonstration at NUEA, which is the Organization for Continuing Education, and I participated in a demonstration and was convinced that this might be something that we really should look into in rural Nevada. Then there was a task force for continuing education which was working on recommendations and the review of continuing education for the accreditation. And during that time we were looking at alternative ways in which we might deliver more programs and different programs to the area that we serve. We talked about many things, and one of the suggestions that I made was maybe we should look into this, which we did. And then we're able to get a grant from the Title I of the Higher Education Act, which made it possible for us to conduct a feasibility study. And we brought in Lauren Parker and Marcia Baird from University of Wisconsin to help us with the study, and found out that really it was the kind of thing that might help us be better able to serve the state. After that, I was also able to write another grant, and with the encouragement of Dr. Danquist, we were able to get additional funds which helped us start up the program, buy the equipment, and this kind of thing. So now we're at that point.
Is there any particular criteria for the classes that are being offered?
Yes, we're trying to find classes that are of great interest or need in the community from smaller groups of people. We have, for instance, a teacher group who wants education courses, and we usually can provide those right on site. But some of the other things that a person might want, such as anthropology, or perhaps a course in sociology, history of Nevada, something of that kind, insurance, real estate, those are really a large population in any one area of our small communities.
Grace, what do you see as the future of Unite here at UNR?
I think it has a real great future because it gives us an alternative delivery system. The circumstances under which we're providing education today, with increased interest and need, so that there are all these courses that we can offer. In addition to that, it's a system which can serve conferences and forums. One can bring in someone from anywhere in the world to participate in this interactive system, so that one's imagination is about the limit as to how it can be used.
That sounds very exciting. Thank you very much for talking with us.
You're welcome, Judy.
The teleconference lasted approximately 1.5 hours with 32 lawyers and journalists participating. Comments, opinions, agreements, and disagreements were voiced on the First Amendment. Even more important, the teleconferencing system works and works well. UNR and residents of Nevada will benefit from Unite.
While the university is in the business of continuing education, that is the business that brings us together today. That is the business that this system is in part designed to improve. I would like to thank all of those here today in the University Center and all of those out along the line for participating in what has been a very lively discussion of a very important matter. I hope it is only the first of many. Thank you again.
This is Judy Drews for Nevada Weekly.
Our next feature deals with the controversial MX missile project. Certainly the MX debate has been widely reported in the media, and here on the UNR campus, members of the Environmental Study Board have presented a number of public forums on this subject.
The impact of MX is not just economic, it's also environmental. And it's even recently been suggested, Terry, that if the MX missile project were adopted in Nevada, that might free up some funds or provide an opportunity for research in geothermal and non-fossil fuel energy resources in the state.
Don, certainly there are a great many issues involved in the MX missile question, and our reporters Renee Weber and Rich Perot investigated the MX missile project and filed this story.
The MX missile project is a sensitive and controversial issue, particularly for residents of Nevada and Utah. During the last decade, continuing growth of Soviet weaponry has led many to believe we need to upgrade our land-based intercontinental ballistic missile force. The Pentagon states that as soon as 1982, Moscow will be capable of destroying nearly the entire current U.S. ICBM force, with enough left over to hit our remaining military and civilian targets. The missiles themselves are enormous. They are nearly 8 feet in diameter and stand taller than a 6-story building, weighing 190,000 pounds and designed to carry 10 or more warheads. In the following segment, with interviews conducted by reporter Renee Weber, we have attempted to present both sides of an admittedly complex issue.
I asked Dr. Mike Reed, professor of economics at the University of Nevada, what kind of effect he felt this project will have on Nevada.
It's like getting lost in quicksand. The MX missile project, as it is now being talked about, is 2.5 times the size of the Alaska pipeline, just the construction phase. It's a huge project. Estimates now give dollar value to the project something like $33 billion, which is possible in the future, by the time the thing is finished, to talk about tripling the cost. Something like $100 billion is very likely. For Nevada, that means something like $9 billion just for construction phase alone. That's why I say it's quicksand. That thing is so massive that Nevada is going to well, it's going to disappear as we know it, I would argue, simply from the size of the program. The requirements, the resource requirements, the billions of gallons of water, something approaching 30 million tons of sand, 600,000 tons of cement, 200 million gallons of asphalt for the roadways, of which you're talking 10 to 15,000 miles of new roads, 2,000 miles of railroad track, and I don't see Nevada's potential to produce those things. The construction phase, as I see it, for the MX missile, assuming the thing gets built, is going to have to come from out of state.
The Air Force has stated that the MX will provide 22,000 jobs for Nevadans. I asked Mr. Reed if this would be a tremendous benefit for Nevada economically.
Well, the jobs will be a tremendous benefit. 25 to 30,000 construction jobs are the estimates I've seen. Given the likelihood of people coming into Nevada, you're talking about more than 22, 30,000 jobs. You're talking like a likely population inflow into Nevada of something like 100,000 people, 125,000 people, is highly likely for that kind of project. So to simply look at the number of jobs being created by the MX missile construction project is understating significantly the population impact in Nevada. Now, how we support something like 100,000 people is a very good question. We can't support the people we have now in terms of quality of life arguments. It's very difficult to talk about maintaining water supplies, clean air. We don't have any houses. We don't have the surplus capacity for that thing. Not at all.
I also talked with Michael Malby, the disarmament coordinator for SANE, S-A-N-E, which is a citizens alert group in Washington, D.C.
So it's our perspective that the threat, the Minuteman vulnerability threat, is in fact theoretical and does not require a massive new weapons program that will be extremely destabilizing and cost the American taxpayer probably somewhere upwards of $100 billion before it's done. And that if you're talking about strong defense, there are many, many other areas of our national defense that are lacking, and that it is patently absurd to put that money into this sort of Rube Goldberg, Dr. Strangelove program when so many other segments of the military really are lacking.
I asked Mr. Malby how he felt about the MX system being a land-based operation.
Clearly, the wiser decision would be to move missiles off of land and put them onto submarines if you felt that there was some need. We already have 5,000 missiles on submarines, or 5,000 warheads, excuse me, each of which packs a power 10 or more times that which we dropped on Hiroshima in World War II. Our alternative to the MX would be to move the missiles off of land, and if the need was there, to build yet another set of intercontinental ballistic missiles, to build them in new submarines. It makes absolutely no sense in our eyes to maintain the threat of having Soviet missiles fired at U.S. silos, land-based silos. It brings under the threat of nuclear war all of the citizens of Nevada.
In a public forum at Meadowood Mall, sponsored by the University of Nevada, Lieutenant Colonel Carl Rohl argued in favor of the land-based missile system.
We have many, many strategic systems throughout the United States. In fact, 30 states have strategic systems that are deployed throughout them already. Okay, any attack upon any single one of those is an attack upon the sovereignty of the United States. There's no doubt whatsoever that they are attacking the United States. Whereas if it were submarines or something, and one mysteriously disappears, you don't know who attacked it, or you don't know who to, retaliate against. It's one of the things. Plus, having them in the United States makes command and control, positive command and control, a very important attribute that we now have with the ICBM force as well as the bomber force. The submarine force does not enjoy that particular characteristic.
Lieutenant Colonel Ruhl went on to point out the positive aspects of the MX missile system.
The MX system had to be survivable, it did have to be verifiable, it had to be affordable, it had to be environmentally acceptable, and it had to be consistent with arms control as well as arms reduction.
Project of this magnitude being proposed by the Department of Defense and the Air Force.
Bob Hill, the state planning coordinator for the state of Nevada, had this to say on the project's impact on Nevada.
We feel that in these two rural states where little if no resources exist to deal with planning and impact assessment, that we must have funds available to us to allow both states to directly participate in the planning process. I think it's just too early to say whether the benefits will outweigh the negative impacts. I think our job over the coming year or two will be to try and use whatever resources we have available to us to ensure that any potential benefits can be maximized, and to ensure as well that any negative impacts can be minimized.
The chief Pentagon spokesman for the MX is General Guy Hecker, whom I contacted but who I was unable to schedule for an interview. General Hecker sees Russian aggression abroad and national unity at home as two of the major reasons why supporting the MX is the patriotic thing to do. In this film about the MX produced for the Air Force, we are told how and why the system works.
Each MX missile will be confined to a single road network, connected to 23 shelters, spaced more than a mile apart. So one warhead could not destroy more than one shelter. Since an enemy must target all shelters in the system, he would exhaust most or all of his missiles. Therefore, an actual attack on the MX is highly unlikely, greatly enhancing our ability to deter nuclear war. To satisfy the terms of the SALT agreements, the missile and its launch equipment are assembled in an open area, some distance from the shelters. Special rail tracks connect the assembly site with each group of shelters. The missile and its launch equipment are moved by rail car to the shelter area, then joined to a pair of road vehicles to form a mobile launcher unit. After unloading, the rail car leaves, and a barrier is placed on the tracks to limit the shelter area to one missile. The missile then drives under a shield to hide it from observation. The shield, now straddling the missile, travels to each of the shelters, pausing for a length of time to give the illusion of activity. At one of the shelters, it actually leaves the missile and launcher. To further ensure SALT compliance, each reinforced concrete shelter has sections which can be removed periodically to verify that each shelter group has only one missile. To provide added survivability, each missile launcher can quickly move without the shield under its own power to another shelter. This capability might be employed if there was concern that the location of the missile had been discovered. If attacked, and the President gives the order, the missiles can be launched within seconds. Giant pistons push the MX missile in its canister up through the shelter roof. The pistons continue to raise the missile to its launching position. The MX system ensures that the United States can maintain a survivable ICBM force. No matter what the threat, MX will guarantee our ability to deter nuclear warfare.
It is not missiles that kill people, it's the hydrogen bombs which sit on the tip of the missiles. And in that category, the U.S. continues to lead the Soviet Union by a ratio of almost 2 to 1, 9,000 to somewhere around 5,400 for the Soviets. I see no need for a new weapon system, and I do seriously think that the question of the Soviet threat is somewhat overblown. The MX will not even begin deployment. It will not even begin to go into the ground until 1986. Well, the SALT II treaty runs out in 1985. I have yet to hear anyone give me a good explanation as to why the Soviets would negotiate a new arms control agreement, knowing that a system that the U.S. had already spent, what, by 1985 will probably have spent over $20 billion on the MX anyway. Why would the Soviets negotiate a treaty that they knew we had to have to make a $20 billion investment perhaps work out in the end? I don't think that it puts us in a very good bargaining position for SALT III, and I'm fairly certain that deployment of the MX would doom the SALT talks.
Our best particular strategy is to prevent the war by being in a position to have military balance, which is in the area of rough equivalence. Don't allow the superiority to develop on the part of the Soviet Union, so that one thing, if they were to achieve the superiority, we think that perhaps they would not even have to use a nuclear weapon, that all they have to do is to use the form of coercion. And you'd lose your negotiation position and position of influence within the world.
You look at Nevada now. If you look at Nevada now as a neat little place where there are not a lot of people, where there are wide open spaces, where you can get away from people, the attitude toward decentralization, a lot of the old-time attitudes about leave me alone and I'll leave you alone, that kind of attitude, then Nevada is going to disappear. I mean, I just can't see any way that you start dumping that kind of activity into a place like Nevada and have it stay the same. We're in a world of hurt. But if you look at it in terms of just the basic economic categories, more jobs, more income, things like that, then there's going to be a tremendous benefit to Nevada, given that you get some federal support, some public support somewhere to allow Nevada to carefully absorb and plan for the absorption of the impact of that system. All this is said, of course, in light of the assumption that the thing does get built. Now, that's open to question right now.
This is Renee Weber reporting for Nevada Weekly.
John and I would like to thank you for joining us for this very special edition of Nevada Weekly, and we'd like to tell you that this very same program will be shown again on Monday morning, February 25th at 6:30 a.m.
All of us at Nevada Weekly hope you have a pleasant evening and a good week. Good night.
Okay, very fine. This is testing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is the Unite teleconferencing. Unite teleconferencing.
Hello, this is Tony calling in from Winnemucca.
Bob Ritter in Reno. I'm Beatty in Las Vegas.
Earl Kennedy in Hall.